Go.
Thank you. Appreciate that. I'm on. Good morning.
Good morning. Good morning, Robert.
Donald, thank you for the meditation. He said Christ consciousness 9 times. So maybe we should talk about that, do you think? It's interesting to me when I'm working on something during the week, because that's what happens. What comes out on Sunday morning is what I've been working on. And I've been looking at self-image. How do we think about ourselves? And what effect that has in the life we experience. I was reminded of an idea called the scotoma. If you want to look it up in the dictionary, S-C-O-T-O-M-A. And a scotoma is a sensory blocking out of things that we don't believe are true. It has been proven over and over again that we literally don't see what we don't believe. So if you believe this, then that's what you see, and this comes flooding in. That's why somebody can see exactly the same thing and have a totally different story than you do. So that's why eyewitness is not exactly perfect, because we all have different stories that play out in our minds, and those stories aren't necessarily what's actually happening, it's what we believe is happening. Lots of proof on that. We talked about it in the past. About a year and a half ago, I had the 6F card. Some of you might remember that. If you've ever seen the old lady, new lady things, and you see what you believe. I'll say it again. You see what you believe. Now, at the base of the brain is a thing called the reticular activating system. It's part of the limbic, or the old ancient part of the brain, the stem. And it's a reticular means it's a net-like. Activating means it's a switch that turns off and on. And that switch is activated by your storage, your subconscious mind, allowing through what you believe. Okay, now there's been lots of study on this. One of the ones that sticks in my mind is a group ran an ad in a newspaper in a certain place, in the one ads for a job. And it was several years ago, but the job, I think it was like $25,000 a year, and it was the outline was anybody could do it. No special qualifications, just money. And it was interesting, it really was. Then they came back and they said, okay, we're going to run, and really I need to start this way. They ran it $100,000 a year in the ad. Everybody there? And that was the big, big figure. And they got 1 or 2 resumes, period.
Yeah.
Okay? They came back and ran it a month or so later, and they dropped it to $50,000 a year, and they got about 40 or 50 resumes. It's the same ad, same location in the paper, same qualifications a month later at $25,000, and they were flooded with resumes. Why? Because somebody that believes they're worth $25,000 a year reads it and says, oh, I better try that. Somebody, if they don't believe they can do $100K a year, they don't answer. And so that has been proven over and over and over again. Okay? Oh, I'm going to have a drink. I don't know how I got off of this thing. and we used to talk about this quite a bit, because it's a phenomenon that's hard for people to believe. So what is the difference? Self-image, self-awareness, self-care. And so what we're looking at is how much do we anticipate? How much do we expect? Jesus said the kingdom of heaven is within, which literally means within you is a spark of Christ consciousness, which is the place where God dwells within each one of us. And that spark is connected to everybody. And so when you have certain thoughts, the law of attraction says as you think, you create, or you draw it to you. So we're all connected, and how big is your self-image? How much do you want to think you're worth? How much do you want to think you're valuable? Okay, how do you take care of the temple? So, got to go to the Bible, okay? And in 1 Corinthians, I think it is, before I look it up. 1 Corinthians, very, very interesting conversation that Paul uses. And I'm going to have my glasses any minute now. Okay? Okay. I've got them here. I got them somewhere. By the way, thank you. I have a new suit on and I can't find things. There it is. They're going to edit that out.
Manifestation.
Yeah, manifestation. Yeah, see what you believe in happens, right? It's funny. So anyway, 1 Corinthians, okay, this is 1 Corinthians 3:16. Know ye not that you are the temple of God, and that the Spirit of God dwelleth in you? Now, can that be clearer? Let me give it to you again, and I'll take it out of the Old English. Know ye that you are the temple of God, which means literally your body is the temple of God. Okay? And then it goes on and says, and that the Spirit of God dwelleth in you, which is the same thing as saying the kingdom of heaven is within. So who are you? Here's the Spirit of God. And this conversation is amazing to me because as a child, I was trained that I was a sinner, I was no good, and I had to go seek forgiveness and salvation because I was going to hell. And what kind of self-image is that? Okay? And if I really am the temple of God, what am I capable of? And what are you capable of? And what's in your spirit? Who are you? What is there? So it's all back to expectations and what we've been trained to believe. The issue becomes, what do I think of myself? And unfortunately, the world out there has trained us to be careful, to not get your hopes up. What started this whole thing, frankly, is those of us, and most of you in the room, are trained in affirmative prayer. And in affirmative prayer, you learn to reverse the conversation. So if somebody says something, you'll say, well, I know deep within you is spirit, that this whole thing's going to work out. Anybody ever heard that before? Because that is the standard affirmative prayer. Because if you really believe you're the temple of God, then everything I think about, I create, and that's my expectation. But I had somebody come back and say, well, how do I know it's going to work out? Would you agree with that? It's kind of, I don't know, because doubt comes in. So the only answer for that I realized is because I know. See, how do I know it's going to work out? I don't. Anybody know, ready to predict what's going to happen in the next minute of life? Next week, next hour, next day, whatever it is. You just know it's going to work out. So there's a trust and an anticipation, and that trust and anticipation depends on how much you take the story at base value. In other words, do you really believe you're a child of God? And that is where the rubber meets the road, if you understand that. So how do I know it's going to work out? I don't, but I do know, which is faith. And that's why I entitled this article that I wrote today, The Joy of Faith, because there's a joy. Anybody ever get excited when something really works out? Okay, it's kind of like, wow, it happened. And we worry and we fret, and all of a sudden it happens, and there's a joy in that. So why don't we just live with the joy expecting it to happen anyway? Because that's really what we're dealing with. And the world has trained us to doubt, to fear, to be upset. And I'm saying over here, Spirit is trying to say, hey, I'm within you. You have me, Christ consciousness, with you all the time. And all I have to do is trust it. Okay? And trust and faith means I know it'll work out. Okay? Now, well, I got to do this. There's another, I'm going into the Bible again. This is one of my favorite verses. And this verse says in Matthew 6:23. No, excuse me, 33. Okay? Where'd it go? It says, be not anxious. That's over here. Be therefore not anxious about tomorrow, for tomorrow will be anxious for the things of itself. So tomorrow's going to take care of itself. How do I know it's going to work out? Because I just know it's going to work out. And if I'm on a spiritual path, doing the work, I know it's going to work out. So it's that automatic trust that everything's okay. Now, it also says in the previous verse, you ready for this? But seek ye first the kingdom of heaven, of God, and the righteousness, and all these things shall be added to you. So rather than, and again, I'm going back to my old speaking days when I was on the circuit, the whole idea of goal setting is to take it into your mind, repeat it over and over again, visualize it, know it's going to happen. I used to train people to count out $100 bills. And how much money do you want? Well, count out $100 bills up to 10,000, million. You ever count $1 million in $100 bills? Yeah, it does, Rick. Okay, and that's kind of the tricks that are being taught in visualization. Nothing wrong with it. However, it says, all I have to do is dwell on the Christ consciousness within me, and these things are added automatically, spontaneously. So see, again, there's the physical, the metaphysical, and then the spiritual. Everybody there? So we have studied for years at the metaphysical level. What we're saying now is the spiritual level, and when I go to the spiritual level automatically takes care of the rest of it. But I have to trust it and let it go. So the old phrase, let go and let God, everybody heard that one? And we talked about it last week, but it's really difficult just to stop worrying about something. Okay, now I apologize. We've been working on getting this closing together. Anybody ever been closing on a house? You keep getting calls, well, we forgot this, and you need this piece of paper. And, oh, you forgot to, dot the I here, you forgot to sign here. And every time that turns around, oh my God, is it still working? Yeah. Okay. Now, 2 o'clock on Monday, we are closing on this house. And it's a miracle, it really is in its own way. However, all of the fears and doubts in the process were completely unnecessary. Amen. Because God is in charge, and at the spiritual level, I don't have to do any of this inner work here. All I have to do is go and know God is doing it, which is what Jesus was saying 2,000 years ago. So it's an idea is, how big is your belief in yourself? See, the whole idea of this whole thing is, who are you? Who am I? What are we doing? Who are we in this world? And how big do I think I am in this world? So what are your expectations? Okay, I myself realize sometimes I fall back into getting along. Anybody familiar with settling? In other words, I get to a point and I settle, but I know there's more. Yep. Okay? And so what are my expectations? What are your expectations? Okay, the world will tell you, don't get your hopes up, boy. Don't expect too much. You got to be careful, which is how I've been programmed. And so I used to train on it. When I was doing strategic planning for the corporate world, we always had to, when we did a business plan, strategic plan, we always had to have a back door, it's called. Anybody familiar with that? That means if it doesn't work, this is what you do. Okay, and that's normal corporate structure practice. And I'm realizing that's getting ready to fail. So in my life and in my beliefs and in my interactions with you, what am I expecting? Who am I expecting? What type of community, spiritual community? What type of building are we going to build? By the way, we're expanding that building already. Kat and I were talking this morning, we can make the sanctuary bigger, and we can add 10 feet this way to add more classrooms. So it's already planning on that, okay? Randy's not here, but it's okay.
So we need new pictures.
Yeah. It's really funny. Randy and I were out on the property Thursday and Friday, and he was saying, well, we can put a youth building here. You got it? Because as we start planning, Spirit is saying, why don't you try this? Why don't you try that? Now, why would we have those ideas? Because Spirit is saying, expect a little bit more. Expand your beliefs, Robert, and Randy, and the rest of us. Okay? It's really fascinating. So what are we hooked into? What are we believing? Who are we believing? What strategies are we believing? And it goes on and on from there. It really does. Practical metaphysics, they didn't meet this morning, but I have to use some things from there. By the way, this book is excellent. It really is. I suggest, do we have any for sale? Are we out? Okay. Can we order some more?
Absolutely.
Thank you. Good. Okay, now this, I have a tendency to be careful about what we talk about because we're all children of God and we all have ideas that sound reasonable. But there's a little bit of conversation here which I'm going to kind of gloss over. But orthodoxy has preached that man is a poor, miserable sinner. This is something that needs to be carefully considered. Now I'm going to jump over. The Christian traditionalists developed this dogma that Jesus was God and that man was a miserable sinner. This was to make the total separation between Jesus and man appropriate. See, I believe, and a lot of writers are starting to look at, why did we make Jesus a deity? Why did he become divine and we're not? When he said, these things I do, ye shall do. Kingdom of heaven is within. And he said, you and I are the same. That's what the Bible says. So how come he got deified and we're not? And my belief is we have been unable to accept the fact of who we really are. It's frightening. And that's why Jesus was actually crucified for blasphemy, saying that he was God. And we're sitting here this morning saying you are the expression of God. You are God. Which in 2,000 years ago could have been blasphemy. However, is it true? And see, the idea is, does it ring true for you? Is your heart ready to accept that idea? Not everybody is. And it's okay, because everybody has to live at their level. Remember, scotoma, I only see what I can believe. So I'm asking you to expand your belief into possibility of who you really are. Okay? Now, society has all kinds of rules and regulations. Another one I ran into is age-related. If anybody's familiar with those, you're going to need to change your glasses at some point in time. You're going to have to get ready to, I'm not even going to go there with the negatives that I've been told. Especially when you, and no, it doesn't matter. But the idea is we plug into these things and then that's what we see. Now, what is possible? I don't know. But I do know there's a more possible in the Christ consciousness than there is in the ego consciousness, which is what we're talking about here this morning. So if my body is the temple of God, how should I take care of it? Somebody help me. What kind of food do I put in it? Don't tell me. And are we taking care of it? Are we walking? Are we taking care of it? Are we brushing our teeth? How do you feel about how your image is in the mirror? Because you're an expression of God. And how are you taking it? How are you clothing it? Okay? How are you taking care of yourself? And is it appropriate for a child of God whose temple is the temple of God? And that's not for me to say. That's for you to think about is what I'm asking you to do. So what are your expectations? How far do you want to go? What do you want to do? How much do you want to contribute to the building we're going to build down the road? Okay? And it's all part of our personal choices. Okay? Then it goes on and says, let's go on. Christian tradition has supported the concept of miserable sinner. Okay? Jesus discovered his own divine image, and he fulfilled the personnel requirement of living it out into expression fully and completely, and demonstrated it in his own experience, and said that we can do that also. So, as a group of people, I believe that's what we're doing, is we're on that spiritual path. We talk about the spiritual path. And we talk about prosperity, we talk about health, we talk about relationships, we talk about living well. We talk about feeling good about self, yes? And that's all part of the spiritual life. But the first thing is to understand who you are. Okay? So the question is, who am I? And all the way back, God told Moses, I am that I am, which is I am. I am. So when you say I am, you are saying I am the expression of God if you don't want to go fully to God. And so what are you saying? What are you putting beside I am? I am joyful, I am happy, I am prosperous, I am healthy, I am upset, I am sick, I am sick, and whatever you tack to it is what you're saying your expectation is. Is it easy? No, because we got to deal. You got to deal with skin cancers, and you got to deal with a little bit of fat, and you got to do this, you got to do that. But again, it's all part of who I am and who I accept as I am. So when I say I am, who are you connecting to? Okay. So I encourage us, all of us, to know that we are the Christ. And the Christ consciousness is that description of God within me, where everything is perfect, everything is good, and life works. I even might find a parking spot once in a while. And my last statement here is faith is simply knowing that that is true. And simply knowing that whatever it is, it's going to work out. And so when I look at things, we got closing 2 o'clock, and I know it's going to work out. By the way, my phone, we found it, Madeline found it. Last
What was
week, it was in the truck.
Not
Right,
even
on the floor. Now, how it got there, I don't know. Somebody must have snuck into my truck and put it on the floor.
From McDonald's. They seen you leave McDonald's and they made sure they followed you,
Yeah.
opened your truck.
Yeah, it's funny, it really is. And see, we let those minor things get on. Okay, so what? Well, it'll work out. So thank you for allowing me to share. That's what I've been working on this week, really. Next week, who knows? Subject to further interpretation. I love you. God bless.
Well, thank you, Robert.